Today we have a poem by Robert Frost, Two Tramps in Mud Time. Frost is an all American poet. His writing is so incredible that every time you read his poem, new meanings come out at you. His poems are fit for a little child as well as a grave old person who has seen so much in the world because there is such a wealth, a depth of meaning. So I would suggest that a Frost poem is to be read over and over. So let's see. Two Tramps in Mud Time. Robert Frost was very famous for using all the themes, the locales, the situations of a rustic New England. He was a farmer and a poet. For 9 years, he worked on a farm and he was very keen on farming. And he used these topics of the very uh, close to nature, of the woods and the streams and the people of the farms. But in this, there is a deep philosophical, psychological insight is seen in all his poems. So let us see. Out of the mud, two strangers came and caught me splitting wood in the yard, and one of them put me off my aim by hailing cheerily, hit them hard. So here we see the imagery, we can see the poet is standing out in his yard and he is chopping wood. And at that moment, two tramps come into the picture. They come in, walking in from God knows where, and one of them calls out loudly, almost as if to make our poet lose his aim. He calls out, hit them hard. I knew pretty well why he had dropped behind and let the other go on away. I knew pretty well what he had in mind. He wanted to take my job for pay. So, when the poet saw the tramp showing interest in his work or almost trying to put him off his aim by speaking out loudly, our poet realizes that this tramp wants to take his job. The tramp saw a means of making some money and he is trying to persuade the poet to give up and give over the job to him so that he could earn his day's wage. So here we see right in the beginning is this imagery, the rich imagery of New England. We can see that the forest, the greenery, and we see the poet chopping wood, which is manual labor. So, first of all, Frost gives a lot of importance for human beings to do work with their hands, that we must be one with nature and these things that are part of our livelihood. No man should feel that it is beneath him. So, this is one of the first ideas that come out at us. Good blocks of oak it was I split, as large around as the chopping block, and every piece I squarely hit fell splinterless as a cloven rock. So here we see that this is good block of oak. And the poet, he knows what he is doing. He is doing it to perfection. He says that every piece of wood that I chop, it is falling down splinterless. There is nothing wrong with it. He is doing a perfect job. And we see these divergent lines of thought already coming through, where Frost is on one side showing us the value of manual labor and also showing the human attitude towards it. Look at the tramps. They seem to think that this job is theirs by right. They feel that surely this house owner, the master of the house, he will not be as good at it as we are, and he will sooner or later have to give up his job to us. And the blows that a life of self control spares to strike for the common good, that day giving a loose my soul, I spent on the unimportant wood. So, this paragraph tells us about the poet. He lives a disciplined life, a life of self control, of being in peace with his surroundings, of being in love with hard work. So here he says that a life of self control gave me this ability to cut this wood to such perfection. Yet at the same time, the divergent thought comes where the poet almost self critically says that this self control that should have been used for maybe the good of the world, the good of humankind. But that morning I was using it on splitting unimportant wood. So, this is a deep philosophy which is constantly telling man that should our actions be towards the common good, towards the enrichment of human life, we need to remember that this four times Pulitzer Prize winning poet was constantly a teacher, constantly a leader. His poems sought to shape the morale of America. He wanted to instill in the people around him the good of human life, of how to be charitable, to be good towards your fellow man and towards nature. We see enjambment, that is one of the poetic devices. We need to remember visual imagery as well as enjambment because each line is a preface for the line that is coming after it. The sun was warm, but the wind was chill. You know how it is with an April day. When the sun is out and the wind is still, you're 1 month on in the middle of May. Very rich imagery continues. And he says the sun was warm and the wind was chill. You know how the transition between the seasons is shown, as well as how we have the self and the other, the literal and the symbolic. The literal and the symbolic are constantly at play in a frost form. There is this summer day which, for one moment you feel it is hot, and there are those days when you get out into nature and you immediately feel, that it is chilly, that it is cold. And what is seemingly something on the outside could have a different meaning on the inside. So the literal and the symbolic is always there, the self and the other. So we see divergent thoughts and binary opposites, the general and the particular. So, and if you dare so much to speak, a cloud comes over the sunlit arch. So, one moment you see the sunlight, there is a sunlit arch, and you venture out and you feel the cold. A wind comes off a frozen peak, and you're 2 months back in the middle of March. And we have all experienced these days where he says that it is an April day and you are suddenly, because of the chill on one side that comes in stealing in when there is a warm day, it reminds you, it takes you back 2 months back. A bluebird comes tenderly up to alight and turns to the wind to unruffle a plume, his song so pitched as not to excite a single flower as yet to bloom. So here we see a blue bird. He's coming tenderly and he's ruffling his plume and he is singing. But still, his songs do not excite even a single flower to bloom, which means here we see that the flowers are not ready to bloom. It is not the season yet. And the bluebird, it is not anything lacking in him that his songs do not inspire the flowers, but rather he knows that it is not time for those songs to come forth. He knows that this is not the time for the flowers to bloom. And so his song has a different tune. It is snowing a flake, and he half knew winter was only playing possum. Except in color, he isn't blue, and he wouldn't advise a thing to blossom. Nature is always so it is so synchronized. This bluebird knows that it is not time for the flowers to bloom, and if they bloom now, they would freeze. He knows the chill in the wind, and his songs are not for the flowers to come forth. So Yeah. So we see all this rich imagery. The winter for which we may have to look the water for which we may have to look in summertime with a witching wand. In every wheel ruts now a brook, in every print of a hoof a pond. So now he says how the seasons are changing. This very water that is now the poet says that it is there in every brook, in every stream, even in the wheel ruts of a carriage, there is a little brook formed. And the same thing during the summer, this water had to be sought out with a witching wand. Witching wand is a stick for discovering water. So the water that was so rare to be found, all of a sudden seems to be all around them in little brooks and streams. Be glad of water, but don't forget the lurking frost in the earth beneath that will steal forth after the sun is set and show on the water its crystal teeth. And again, the magnificence, the extreme beauty, the exhilarating beauty of nature is presented when the poet says, don't be fooled, don't be deluded by thinking that, oh, the water has come forth and it's going to be bright and it's going to be sunny. And that sunlit arch, there is the chill winter beneath lurking, according to the poet. And by the time it is evening, this chilly winter will come forth. It will steal forth after the sun is set and it will show its crystal teeth. What is its crystal teeth? Its iciness on the water surface. The time when most I loved my task, the two must make me love it more. So this time, the poet is really enjoying his work, this manual labor, and at that very precise time, these two tramps are making him love it even more. This makes us think that sometimes when we are doing an activity which we love so much, which gives us happiness, but at the same time, the world may tell us that this is not ours to do. The world makes us question our wish or our passion, and we are so reluctant to give up that activity. We want to hold on to that activity. The fact that the tramps want to take his work makes him love it even more. He wants to do it with even more zest. By coming with what they came to ask, you'd think I never had felt before the weight of an axe head poised aloft, the grip of earth on outspread feet, the life of muscles rocking soft and smooth and most in vernal heat. The poet is so excited now about his work. He says that this feels that I have never felt before, this exhilarating joy of the weight of an axe posed aloft and the grip of the earth, and he feels his own muscles responding to the hard work, the sweat, the joy of working hard. So many self help books, philosophical books, everywhere we see that exercise is so important for our body and our mind. And this physical labor, it gives joy to the mind. So many people and writers all over the world have confessed that working with the land, if you look at poets like Seamus Heaney, everyone says that working with the earth, to dig, to use a shovel, to plant trees, it gives immense joy to the human. Out of the wood, two hulking tramps from sailing God knows where last night, but not long since in the lumber camp. So, this is the job of the tramps. This is what they do for a livelihood. They seem to have just come out of the lumber camps where the wood is cut and it is packed and sent. So they know this job very well and they are sure that the author cannot do it as well as they do. They know that they just need to hang around there and make him feel guilty, because on one hand he would feel guilty that he's taking away their livelihood, and on the other hand he feels that no, this is not my job. So but they thought all chopping was theirs by right, Men of the woods and lumberjacks, they judge me by their appropriate tool. Except as a fellow handled an axe, they had no way of knowing a fool. So they felt that the poet is an amateur, he is a beginner, and perhaps for them, in the eyes of these professionals, they may have felt that the poet is not doing it in a professional manner. But the poet has found his own way of dealing with it. He has his own style of cutting or chopping the wood. So this also shows us individuality against the general, the particular against the general. When a person is taught to do any activity, it could be a dance, it could be a song. You would see a singer who sings, who is classically trained, and you would see a simple child singing in as fascinating a manner, and that child would be untaught. The child would have learned only from what is in the atmosphere around. We see the artist who is trained at the highest colleges, and we see, somebody who has just taken up a pencil and is simply doodling, but who brings forth a brilliant masterpiece. So we are reminded of Gray's poem, where he says that how an unknown Milton or an unknown Cromwell could be lying in the tomb, a Cromwell guiltless of his country's blood could be lying there. So, all this shows us that man has an innate ability, a love, a passion, and this has nothing to do with his learning. It comes from within. So, we are also taken into mysticism and symbolism. Nothing on either side was said. They knew they had but to stay their stay, and all their logic would fill my head, as that I had no right to play with what was another man's work for gain. My right might be love, but theirs was need. And where the two exist entwined, there was the better right, I agreed. So nothing on either side needed to be spoken again. They knew that they just had to stand there. They had to keep looking at the poet. They just had to keep stand and stare. And sooner or later, the poet would feel that his claim on this work was the love, while theirs was need. And theirs would be the superior claim according to the world to be charitable. Our poet must give up his work. And where the two exist entwined, there was the better right. I agreed. So here the poet is going to agree that he is made to agree that need is greater than love. This is also a philosophical question that is now coming forth. Is need greater than love? Who has more claim to a particular work? Is it the man or woman who needs to earn his livelihood from it? Or is it the one who loves it so much? So here we are made to go into that deep philosophy. Gandhiji has said that when a man's thought, his action, and his work, they are all in a single line, they are all in harmony. That is true happiness. We see a man or a woman who wants to work with the earth, but such a person may, maybe his station, he believes or society perceives it to be above. Such a person may think that I cannot work in the field or in the farm. And is this person to give up his love for nature? So, throughout, we see that we are dictated by social norms, of conventions. Imagine a world where every man's thought, every man's ideas would simply be as music is. Imagine that we are all singing different lines, different tunes of songs in different languages. And would we be offended by another man's tune or song? But then why are we offended by another man's words or actions? Why is the world so filled with hate? when we see that another person has an opinion that is different to us, a belief that is different to us, an evocation that is different to us. So here we see that Frost is trying or wanting to tell us that our evocation and our vocation can be the same thing. In an ideal world, any man may do or pursue what he loves, what his heart desires, and such a world would be an utopia. But yield who will to their separation. My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation. So, my wish in my life is to bring together my avocation and my vocation, my hobby, my passion, my livelihood, my thought must all be united in a single path. This shows us that we should not lead a life of hypocrisy. We should not have one rule for ourselves and another for the world around us. This brings the biblical saying of treat another as you would like to be treated yourself, and to give importance for every man's passion and livelihood. So here we are taken into transcendentalism. The Transcendentalism believed that there is divinity, that everything in nature, manual labor, man's activity, there is an all pervading divine essence in all these. My vocation and my vocation, as my two eyes make one inside. We could say that this poem is an example of transcendentalism. Um, David Henry Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson are some of the pioneers of this transcendental movement, which believed in the divine essence of nature and man's work in it. Now, we can also take this in a symbolic sense as the poet's duty to poetry. Poetry was for him not only for work, not only for art, it was for life as well. His poetry, he aimed, was for helping mankind around him, as well as to write about his favorite theme, which is the rural life of New England. So here we see this woodcutting is also symbolic to the poet's poetry, which was splinterless, which was perfect, and which was his teaching to the world. He believed, like Cicero and Sidney, he believed that poetry was to educate, was to inform the world, as well as to entertain. As my two eyes make one sight, only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever really done for heaven and the future's sakes. So here the poet brings in the, again, we are reminded of the biblical saying. The Bible says that your two eyes must have one sight. If thine mind be one, as thine eye is one, that is, both our eyes bring one image to our heart. He says that we should have only a single aim and we should move towards it with harmony. So, this is a grand or higher concept where man must work with all his focus, with single handedness. And today we see in the politics around us, in the philosophy around us, there is such a lot of double handedness. We see the capitalism around us that forces man to have to be two faced. And here the poet says that if our work must stand for all eternity, it has to have a single aim. And the light of thine one eye, as the Bible says, he wishes to bring the light of doing. Here, a lot of critics have come up with the theory that Frost is not being kind to the tramps and need is greater than love. But I believe, or it is personally, I feel that it is not very important whether the poet gave up the work. We don't know whether he gave it up to the tramps. Maybe he felt sorry for them. So he may have divided the time between love and need. But I personally feel that this is not so important to us. But what is more important is how he wished to tell us that it should be a single minded thought, that our vocation, our evocation, our passion, this is expressed in a Japanese book which has come out lately, the Ikigai, in which there is mentioned the Japanese tradition. Ikigai, the very word means how your passion should be one with the what is helpful to the world around you, as well as to your own self, that you must be truthful to it. So all these ideas come forth in Frost's poem. Frost was given the Congregational Poetry Award or Medal. He received it from President Kennedy. He is one of the most famed poets of America. All his poems are used throughout in education. Birches stopping by woods on a snowy evening after apple picking, mending wall, death of a hired man. All his poems have the background of New England. Thank you.